Jason Cole had never lost an argument in his life, not once, and that was exactly the problem. He was the kind of man who could walk into any room and within 10 minutes have everyone either agreeing with him or too tired to disagree. He worked as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm in Atlanta, Georgia, and he was sharp, genuinely sharp. He caught errors other people missed, he saw problems before they arrived, he was almost always right, and he made sure everyone around him knew it. His apartment was clean and organized, his clothes were sharp. From the outside, Jason Cole looked like a man on his way somewhere real. But there was a pattern nobody talked about at the office. Talented people requested transfers off his team. His last two supervisors had quietly stopped advocating for his promotion, despite his results. His girlfriend of 2 years, Maya, had started going quiet during their evenings together. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that sits in the room like smoke before a fire. Jason noticed none of it. Or maybe he noticed and told himself a story that made it someone else's fault. That is the thing about ego. It does not announce itself. It just slowly clears the room until you are the only one left in it, wondering why everyone keeps leaving. Before we go any further, if you have ever been the smartest person in an argument and still somehow walked away with less than you started with, subscribe to the Bloom Catalyst right now, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Because what Jason is about to learn took him everything to understand, and it might just save you from the same price.
Jason had grown up in a house where being wrong meant being weak. His father was a hard man, brilliant and unforgiving, who treated every dinner table conversation like a courtroom. You brought your evidence or you lost. Jason had learned early that the fastest way to be safe was to be right, and he had spent 33 years perfecting that lesson until being right was not just a habit, but an identity, the deepest, most load-bearing wall in the architecture of who he believed himself to be. He did not argue to win, he argued because losing felt like disappearing. The night the wall cracked was a Tuesday in March. Maya had come home from a long shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, and she had made one small comment about the way Jason had spoken to her at Sunday dinner, something about his tone, something about the way he had corrected her brother in front of everyone over a fact that did not even matter. Jason had the receipts ready before she finished her sentence. He was right about the fact. He could prove it. He laid out his case clearly and without anger, and by the end, Maya was technically unable to argue with him. She looked at him for a long moment after he finished. Then she picked up her keys from the counter and said, quietly and without drama, "Jason, I am not saying you were wrong. I am saying I am exhausted from loving someone who is never right." She left to stay at her sister's. She did not slam the door. That was the part that stayed with him. She did not even have enough feeling left to slam the door. He called his older cousin, Darnell, that night, the one person in Jason's life who had known him since childhood and still told him the truth without flinching. Darnell listened to the whole story. Then he said something that landed in Jason's chest like a stone dropped into still water. He said, "Jay, you keep winning the argument and losing the relationship. At some point, you have to ask yourself, what exactly are you winning?" Jason did not have an answer. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he genuinely did not have an answer. And sitting in the silence of that unanswered question, something very old and very defended in him began, slowly and painfully, to move. The next 2 weeks were the most uncomfortable of Jason's adult life. He started catching himself in real time, noticing the moment an argument began to form inside him, feeling the familiar surge of needing to be right and trying to pause before it left his mouth. It was harder than he expected. The urge was physical, a tightness in his chest, a pressure behind his eyes, something that felt genuinely dangerous to suppress. One morning in a team meeting, he caught himself composing a correction to something his colleagues said, and he sat with it, and he let her finish, and then he let someone else respond, and the correction died in his throat, and the meeting moved on, and the world did not end. It was the longest 4 minutes of his professional week. He made mistakes. Thursday, he snapped at a junior team member over a spreadsheet error in a way that he recognized immediately afterwards as disproportionate, recognized it and felt the specific shame of a man catching himself doing the thing he promised he would stop. He apologized, which was something Jason Cole had rarely done in his career, and the look on the junior member's face, equal parts surprised and quietly moved, told him something important about how rarely the people around him had heard that word from him. He called Darnell that evening and said it had not worked. Darnell said, "You were not trying to fix a habit, Jay. You were trying to dismantle a whole identity. That is not a 2-week project." If you're watching this and you recognize something in Jason right now, that gap between knowing you need to change and the raw difficulty of actually doing it, hit that like button, share this video with someone fighting the same battle, and subscribe to the Bloom Catalyst if you haven't already, because the next part of this story is where everything shifts. The turning point came quietly, the way real turning points usually do. Jason had started writing at night, not a journal exactly, more like a running conversation with himself about what he actually wanted his life to look like. And one night he wrote a question he had never asked himself before. Who am I when I am not defending myself? He sat with that question for a long time. He did not have an answer right away, but the question itself felt like a door, and for the first time he was curious enough about what was on the other side to stop barricading it.
Something shifted in Jason over the following months in ways that were quiet but unmistakable to the people who knew him. He started asking questions in meetings instead of delivering verdicts. He started letting conversations end without needing the last word. He called his team member who had transferred off his project 2 years earlier and apologized. A real apology, not a strategic one. The woman was so surprised she went silent for a moment before responding. His supervisor noticed the change within 6 weeks and said something in their one-on-one that Jason had not heard in years. People are starting to enjoy working with you. He went home that evening and sat with how much that sentence moved him and how sad it was that it had taken this long to earn it. Maya came back, not immediately, not without honest conversation, and not without Jason doing the harder work of listening rather than responding. They sat across from each other in a coffee shop 3 weeks after she had left, and Jason did something radical for him. He asked her to tell him everything she had been afraid to say, and then he listened without interrupting, without building his counter-argument, without keeping score. It was the most difficult and the most important conversation of his life. At the end of it, Maya said, "This is the first time I have ever felt heard by you." Jason did not argue with that. He just said, "I know. I'm sorry it took me this long." Here's what the science explains about what happened inside Jason. The human brain processes social threat, being wrong, being challenged, being corrected, through the same narrow pathways it uses for physical danger. The amygdala, which governs fight-or-flight response, fires in response to ego threat the same way it fires when you step into traffic. This is why being wrong feels physically dangerous to people who have built their identity around being right. Jason's compulsive need to win every argument was not arrogance in the simple sense. It was a nervous system running a survival program that had long outlasted its usefulness. What Darnell's question cracked open and what Jason's nightly writing slowly rewired was the ability of his prefrontal cortex, the rational, relational brain, to override the amygdala's alarm and choose connection over defense. That is not a personality change. That is neurological growth. and it is available to every person willing to sit in the discomfort long enough to let it happen. Jason Cole still catches himself sometimes, still feels the surge of the old reflex when someone challenges him in a meeting or says something he knows is not quite right, but he has learned to recognize the surge for what it is, not strength, not intelligence, just fear wearing a suit, and he's learned that the bravest thing a sharp mind can do is choose understanding over victory. His team is the highest performing team in the company now. Not because he got smarter, because he got honest about what winning was costing him. Now, here's the challenge I'm leaving at your feet. Think about the last argument you won, really won. Had the evidence, made the case, left the other person with nothing to say. Now ask yourself honestly, what did you actually walk away with? Did you walk away with a stronger relationship, a closer connection, a person who felt seen and respected? Or did you walk away with a point proved in a person slightly further away than they were before? Because here's the truth that Jason learned the hardest possible way. Being right is a transaction, but being trustworthy is a foundation, and you cannot build anything lasting on a pile of won arguments. You do not have to choose between being intelligent and being kind. You do not have to surrender your standards to make room for other people. But you do have to decide what you're actually building with your words, walls or bridges. Jason almost lost everything learning that lesson. You do not have to. Share this video with one person in your life who needs to hear this right now. Like it so more people can find it, and subscribe to the Bloom Catalyst, because we are building something here, one story at a time, and the next one might be the one that changes everything for you.